make a start. Welcome to this meeting of the Corporate Overview and Scrutiny Committee on the 10th of July. Just like to remind everybody before we get started that the meeting this evening is being live streamed and recorded for publication on the Council website. Item 1, do we have any apologies for absence? I know we've had apologies from Councillor Fletcher.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, we've also received apologies from Councillor Howden and he's been substituted by Councillor Maney.
Thank you, that's Councillor J. Maney. So the minutes of the last meeting held on the 29th of April 2025. Are there any comments on the accuracy of the minutes? No? Okay, so can we take it that they are an accurate reflection and can we agree them? Agreed, thank you. Item 3, declarations of interest. Do we have any? No? Thank you. So item 4, devolution and local government reorganisation. This is a verbal report from Alex Powell, although I think we've also got some slides here which she's going to talk us through. Thank you.
Chair, is it all right if I just do a brief introduction and then I'll hand over to Alex who'll lead on with the technical slides, which is the main agenda item of this.
Yeah, I'm happy, whatever works for you.
Thank you. So first of all, Chair, thank you for allowing me to come tonight. And the reason I come as leader, I wanted to be as open and transparent as that I could be on both devolution and local government reform. And I said that there had been no doubt that when I was the leader, that I would make sure that Thurrock was firmly at the top of the table and that I would get the best deal for Thurrock. And over the last 2 months, at every single meeting, I've made sure that I've spoke out and, made sure that Thurrock's voice is heard wherever I go. So tonight, I just wanted to take you through some of the developments that have happened since I've become leader. So the programme is really moving at a pace. So there's regular meetings, I go to Essex, to Chelmsford, all the time. The working group has really picked up as well the times that they're going to be meeting. They'll start meeting every 2 weeks, and more so if they need to as the programme progresses. I'll be bringing a paper to Council. I agreed with Councillor Coxall that there would be a July opportunity for all 49 councillors to be able to look at the work that we've done so far and to discuss that in an open forum. And if we need another one later as we work through the programme, then there'll be another meeting that will get called for that. So the devolution bill was published today, so I'll talk about devolution first. So at the moment, we're just working through the detail of that paper. It's 300 pages. So we haven't been able to bring you anything here tonight, but as soon as that's available, I'm sure that we'll be able to share that with you. We still await the decision whether Greater Essex will actually proceed, although we believe that the statutory tests have all been met and that we hope that there will be an announcement that will go to elections next May. And we hope that that will be in the next few days, so maybe Monday or Tuesday next week we should hear that. So across Essex, we've been having some regular meetings on devolution, and it's a meaty piece of work, but it's statutory. So a lot of it is tick boxes, but that we'll make. We know we're going to have a mayor. They're going to, have an office. This is what they'll do. This is the 4 strands that will come under them. So all of that will happen, but there's a lot of work to make sure that when the mayor goes into office on May, whatever, 10th or whatever day it works out, that they've got some work to get on with, that they don't just rock up at an empty building and there's nothing there for them to do. So we're now meeting, and we had a summit on Tuesday, and they'll go away and work on that, and we'll go back in September where we'll start to pull together what the mandate is likely to look like, and also the Police and Fire Commissioner, they're busy working as well, because within 2 years of devolution, the Police and Fire Commissioner has up to 2 years to devolve into the statutory organisation. So that isn't just a man walking in, he's the Police and Fire Commissioner. So although he's got the fireman that he's responsible for, there's all of the staff that man everything else across the fire and the police. So it's not about the fireman will just go across straight away, but it's the person that picks the phone up to tell the fireman that there's a fire and a cat stuck up the tree, you know. So those staff need to all go over. And there's all of the 2P, and I never realised how complex it would be, but it's going to be fairly complex for that piece of work to happen. So I'll now talk about local government reorganisation, and this is the one that probably people understand more than the devolution, because the devolution is an instrument that just happens. So when we remember that when the government announced this, that they was looking at councils of about 500,000. It's not set in stone, but it is being used as a base for building the business cases. So that's what they asked us to do. But what they did say is that all business cases need to be financially viable, and councils should be able to sustain financial shocks. There is now going to be a paper introduced that all of the bids will have to meet, that shows that the bids meet the SIPFA guidelines, and that means only about 10% of your budget should be laid down to debt. So that was announced at the last meeting that I was at, that paper will need to be completed. So, as set out in the press notice, we've been working with Essex on this, on the option. So everybody knows that there's a 5 option. I think that this was the first one to be announced. It works for the smaller is better option, so it's about 350,000, which, although they've said at the beginning it's 500, this one's about 350. I quite like that, you know, like it keeps us closer to our communities. But as a standalone model without significant, and we're talking significant financial support from the government, it's not viable. So if the government doesn't give us that, then it doesn't stack up for us financially, and I think that that's well known. I mean, if the government do want to pay off all of our debt, then I'm sure that many of us will run down the A13 and happily join, because we won't be in any debt anymore. So, but that's where we are. And then there's the emerging 3. So the other part was being led by Essex County Council, and they was looking at 3, 4 and 5, 2, 3 and 4. And what's emerged out of that is 3 is the strongest, and we'll go through, and Alex will take you through those. But the risks of that is the largest of those 3s that they're looking at, because they've dismissed the 4, is councils of up to 700,000, which for me is too big. It takes us further away from our communities. Whilst it meets the financials better than the 5, it does risk us being so split from our communities that worries me. So I wasn't convinced from any of that anybody really looked at what 4 really looks like. How 4 splits up, how it works better, how it meets the indicators. And so I've asked officers to do a piece of work on what 4 looks like, you know, how we could, who it would split with, how it would work, and then lay all of the other financials and everything else that lays over it, which Alex will take you through, to see if that's what is better for Thurrock. Because at the moment we've got 5 and 3. We should look at 4. The 4 should be on the table for us to look at. So that's what I've asked the councillors to do, the officers to do. We're not working from scratch, because everybody's been working and looked at 3, 4 and 5, so that the work is there. So I'm now we've started that work on what 4 looks like, and we're now, early next week, we will launch a community survey, because I want the residents to have a hand in this as well. This isn't about 49 of us saying, well, we've made your decisions for you. You know, so it's about making sure that there's a sense of place, that residents feel like they're engaged in this. And then over the summer, so this will last for a few weeks, you know, and people will be able to take part in that. And myself and other members of the Cabinet will go out across events over the summer, so we'll do further engagement, and as more data comes out and more information comes out, we'll start to go out. And we're not just going to go to the big lunch, you know, like we're going to make sure that we're in the places that our residents are, because the more information that we can gather and feed it into this bid that we'll be writing, you know, I think that the better the more residents will understand exactly what they're getting out of local government reorganisation. So it's about taking them on a journey and us, because at the end of the day, this isn't just about us in the next 5 years. This is 10 years, 15 years, 25 years. So we've got to make sure that Thurrock does get the best deal. And that is the thing that's driving me at the moment, is to make sure that Thurrock's voice is heard and we get the best deal for our residents, our businesses and our organisations. So thank you, Chair, for allowing me to come tonight. And I'll now hand over to Alex and he'll start to tell you about the work that we've been doing.
Thank you.
There we go. Is that? Oh, there we are. There we are. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Leader. Can I just say I'm very grateful for the opportunity to talk to you and to provide an update. And it is always reassuring to know that we have a regular slot to update you on both Devo and LGR. And that is separate to us bringing substantive items in a paper for due consideration once we have a worked up proposal. So again, I'm incredibly grateful to just be able to present where we are almost in real time, because some of this information only became we were aware of this week, so that's why there might be some slightly different images in here that don't look as slick as you might expect, but it's because they have come from different sources. So as the leader said, we have been engaged in this with our partners across Greater Essex for an incredibly long time. And part of the assessments and the options appraisals, particularly with Essex, around the options for 2, 3 and 4, and to a lesser extent, but involved in the business case for 5, being led by Basildon and Southend. And the leader became concerned that Thurrock's interests weren't necessarily being considered in detail, so therefore we are considering what an option around 4 might look like. Now, as we did that, conscious of the work that's already gone on, we've stepped back to think about, well, let's go back to the heart of what we're here to do and what's the test. What's the government asking us? And on the slide 1, you will see the government criteria. And it is just a useful reminder that actually the business case that we need to build, the proposition that we are developing, looks at a number of different things, from sensible economic geography to how LGR impacts devolution, all the way through to ensuring that we maintain the good quality services that our councils currently deliver. But at the heart of what we think about is obviously, because of where we are as Thurrock Council, is that long-term financial sustainability. So moving on to the next slide, within that context, what we're always asking us, and I would ask you and anyone else these similar questions, is that we need to think about, as we explore the different geographies, whether it be the 3, the 5 or the 4, is what in particular are the community considerations that we should be focusing on here in Thurrock and across Greater Essex, what are the regional infrastructure or built environment considerations we need to give some thought to, and are there any particular data or metrics that we need to consider as part of the evidence base. So I just want to park that in your minds now, that is what we're always trying to refine within our thinking as we try and develop this new proposal. So with that in our mind, we look at where we've got to so far. So as we turn this page, we have, and apologies, I couldn't get the printer to print in colour. There's obviously a training course I need to go on or something like that, but you will see behind me in colour the 5 unitary model. Those of you that may well have already have seen the consultation, the informal consultation from that group, you may well have already have seen this and indeed responded to that consultation. But hopefully you are familiar with it, and you see there the proposition that puts Thurrock and Basildon together, as well as what they consider as sensible geographies across Greater Essex. But as you'll see, it's creating a mixed approach in terms of population. And if you think of the target in that criteria that the government set of aiming for 500,000, which is sensible because our own financial analysis tells us that any council that's going to be with Thurrock with our level of debt needs that level of population in order to be sustainable. As you will see, that only one option here creates a council of over 500,000, with the others ranging from between 320 up to 360. So in our view, it is quite financially precarious. You can see a logic to this. You can see that communities could identify with it. You can see that it creates local authority that is close to the community. And that is appealing, you know, and you can see an advantage in that, and you can see some of the economic flows that make sense. But there's no point having councils from day one that will struggle financially. So the leader was very clear to us that with that being the case, without that significant financial support, though, from government, we need to think about an alternative. So if we turn the page, we've also been working with Essex and some other colleagues across Greater Essex, and they are gently settling on a 3-model option, and there are 2 variations of that. There is one here, the first one, which essentially creates a south, a west, and an east. Again, you can see the logic. I must say, financially, there is a degree of comfort from that. You can see that they're large authorities, but some of these authorities are up to, as the leader said, over 700,000, particularly for us in the south. And that's before you factor in growth. So if you think of the growth potential that we have in different parts of Greater Essex, and as we are creating councils that should stand the test of time, you really are creating very, very large authorities. Some might argue difficult to govern. Some might argue doesn't really create much of an identity for those people that live there. So again, it underlies the reason why we need to think of an alternative approach. I can't say the third 3 option, that's not particularly good English, is it? But the alternative, if we move on to the next slide, of the 3, is fairly similar, but you'll see that there is an even larger belt of authorities within the middle. Again, slightly smaller in terms of number, but again, you've got to ask yourself questions around what's the commonality for the community if you live in the pleasant area of Malden on the coast versus whether you're living in Loughton in Epping Forest on the central line. Is there that sense of joint community? Is there that sense of joint identity? So all of these different factors we're having to look at, and does it work from a Thurrock perspective? Are we creating a financially sustainable environment for us and our residents? And we don't think that is quite the case. So those business cases have already gathered a lot of evidence that we have been looking at and we've been considering. And we are now starting to marshal that very quickly to think about how we do an assessment of what that 4 may well look like. And the next slide that I want to show you is essentially how we've broken down the government's criteria and how we're going to evaluate that criteria so that we can reach an assessment as to what we think a viable 4 is. And I think always welcome to have comments on any of this, but this is essentially what we need to unlock and get the right answer to in terms of population, minimising impact on services, strong community engagement, in order to make sure that we're getting it right for 4 to see if there's a viable option. Underpinning that, we are gathering evidence and we are gathering matrix so that we can do that assessment. And the next 2 slides, and they're here for assurance, and I'm more than happy, going back to those questions at the very beginning, is this the right data? I'm more than happy for suggestions around if there's something else we needed to consider. But I wanted to put it in front of you now so that you could see this is the type of data that we're going to be mining to look at as we evaluate what the 4 model might look like. And then lastly, I just want to touch upon the timetable. So I think it's always healthy in moments like this when you've got a lot of work to do very quickly to look at the end point, and that's the 26th of September. So we've roughly got 11 weeks or so to complete this work. And I want to assure you, as the leader said, we want to do the community engagement. We're launching an engagement exercise to seek the views of local residents. We're going to use the evidence and the engagement data that we're part of for across Greater Essex to see what people feel about Greater Essex and their local identities wherever they live. And we'll be bringing this back to overview and scrutiny, working with the member working group back to Cabinet as we get to a position where we have a clear understanding of what the 4 option is, and the council takes a decision as to whether it backs that proposal or an alternative. And very lastly, if I may, everyone loves a critical path. I hope they do. I certainly do. And this is the programme, Critical Path, that covers the work that we're doing, plus business case A and business case B. And there are two things I want to draw out of this timeline. At the very, very bottom, where it says week commencing the 28th, at the very bottom at financial data, you'll see that a lot of us across Greater Essex have commissioned and have got a lot of work going on underway to look at disaggregation of spend of social care, for example, across Greater Essex. We're looking at SITFA. We've asked SITFA to do some work to really understand the debt and the financial profile of councils. Everyone knows our situation and our debt. We're very, very open, but actually we need to understand that broader picture across Greater Essex. And some of that information needs to be assured by other organisations to make sure it's true and accurate. This all comes together towards the end of this month, and as we are doing that, we will have hopefully a proposition as to what we think is a possible viable for. And during the next couple of weeks, as I say, under the heading of socialise and revise, only an officer could have written a phrase like that, we will be talking and sharing it with people and refining it as we get feedback and as things evolve. And then as we move in towards the end period, as we work towards September, we get into a more formal process. For every council involved in this, whether you be a district or one of the upper tiers, where we go through a formal governance process of members being able to consider and to take a decision. I'm conscious I've put a lot of information in front of you, but I wanted, and the leader was very clear, that we are keeping as many people as we can up to date with the information that we have in a timely manner. And the next iteration of this is to bring back the proposition on where we think we are on the 4 as soon as we can. Always happy to take questions, whether it be now or if you have reflections in the future, then by all means drop me an email as ever. But thank you.
Thank you, Alex, and thank you, Leader, as well, for your update there. So I see some hands go up already. Councillor Anderson first, you had a question?
Thank you very much for the report, both of you. So first quick question was, how, when it comes to the forecasting and assumptions that we're going to make, I understand that's going to be a really difficult job. How are we going to do that? Just because, for example, one of the lines, we've got SEND, and it's my understanding that the government are looking to change the SEND system in autumn. They're going to announce changes to that. So we're going to do a bit of work on forecasting SEND costs that are then going to change potentially autumn onwards. How are we dealing with that? It sounds really difficult.
It's a very, very fair question, and actually you could apply that in a number of different scenarios. The government has said that it wants to do some work over fair funding, for example, for all councils. It's going to revise how SEND works. I think the reality of any local government reorganisation and the nature of, we all know this working in local government, I don't think local government has been stable and static in terms of policy, funding, demand for decades. And I think whenever you engage in something around planning for the future, even if it's just your future projections of budget, let alone an LGR process, there is always an element of doing the best you can in terms of forecasting the evidence that you have now and what are your known knowns. And we know what those are, as it were. There are certain things we cannot predict. We can try and interpret what government is saying, but actually I think the approach that we are taking, and I think many others do, is you're on a hide into nothing when you start doing that, because there is no understanding of whether that's correct or not. You just have to build a business case that you think is as accurate and is as a solid foundation that you can, but be very clear about the assumptions that you have made in your business case as you have developed that.
Patrick, yeah, did you want to add to that?
Just to add to that, thank you, Councillor. And it's important to remember, of course, that we're writing business cases for consideration. And so when ministers take a look at these business cases and to choose between them effectively, what we have to explain to them that they're doing and what they know they're doing is looking at a moment in time. So we're giving the best we can at the moment in time about what we think the future of local government could look like. ministers will then make a decision, and then you move into an implementation period. You do that with the partners that you find on the basis of that decision, and then we move into a new technical phase where actually you take more into account the announcements that government has made, and we get further instruction about what the future looks like. And so we need to think about this work in phases, and that this phase we're in now is about providing the best choices to ministers, and we can only do that, as Alex says, on the information we have available.
Did you want to come back, Councillor Anderson?
Thank you very much for those responses. I do appreciate, given the wide range of services that we provide, I suspect at some point, somewhere down the line, some kind of service we provide is always probably under review, et cetera, et cetera. So I appreciate it's a difficult thing to do. Other question I had, is probably more for Councillor Worrell, is we're looking at a full authority model, doing some work on that. Obviously, the sort of sense you gave me was that Essex aren't super interested in that. If that's the case, how much weight do we have if we go and do all this work and we say, using our data for our borough, this looks like a really good option, but Essex haven't done much work on it because they're not that interested in it, and then it's sort of us versus them.
Thank you. So what they've done is, if you look at the Grant Thornton work, it's available for people to look at, and they did look at, so what they presented was 2, 3 and 4, but the 4s that they did present, I didn't believe that there had been enough work into them for it to be the right ones. So we have advised the government, so they're not saying that you can only put 1 in. So there'll be a 5 that we know that Basildon and Southend are going to be putting a 5 in. We know that Essex's preferred option, what they've done is they've wrote it and they've weighted it, and their preferred option has come out at a 3. So I believe that the government should also be able to look at and see, is there more merit in a 4? Now, it will be up to the government to decide whether it is 3, 4 or 5, and then they'll consult on the preferred options. So they're expecting and they're happy to receive, and there was a workshop on this at LGA conference last week, that they are saying they are welcoming multi-bids, like multi-propositions and cases and models from anywhere that is in devolution and LGR. So they're saying that they're absolutely open to that.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you for that. So yeah, I think my concern is just that because Essex is so much bigger, they have a sort of broader and wider sort of data set to work from.
No, they don't. No, we've all got access to the same data, and we've all got access to our own work that we're doing. So Southend's doing their work, Essex will do their work, and we're doing our work. So there is a data pool that we can pull off everything that they're using as well.
Councillor Cecil, did you have a question? I think you indicated.
Thank you for your reports. Is it now a given then that they're splitting up authorities as they cut and carve?
No.
Well, Castle Point and South tendering?
No, what we're doing is that at the moment there's 15 councils, and we will move to 3, 4 or 5. So at the moment, if you count, like we've got three unitaries, and then the districts, which takes it to 15, and they'll move those 15 down into 3, 4 or 5. So they're not cutting through the middle of places. Like, they're not going to say they're going to come through the middle of Thurrock, or they're going to go through the middle of Southend. But it will be 3, 4 or 5.
If I may, in the white paper and the invitation from government, they are looking for us to use the existing boundaries as a building block for those new ones. I think there is flexibility. If there was a quirk of geography that just meant it made more sense that one town was one side than the other, then they could do that. but that gets into a degree of complexity with the boundary commission. I won't comment any further on that to politicians, I don't need to, but in terms of the complexities of designing and delivering, that is very, very hard. So the ambition from the government is, if you're going to do it, and we're going to do it well, use the building blocks of the districts in Essex, and obviously Southend and Thurrock as the two unitaries, as whatever, however you want to map the future.
Well, am I reading it right on alternative 3 unit authority model? They've got Tendering North in the UA1. They've got Castle Point South in UA3.
My
That
sincere
is
apologies.
splitting
to
up
the-
existing authorities.
No, sorry, my apologies. So where we've put north, central and south, that's us to describe the new authority that be at the top will be the north, and then the central one is that, and then the south is referring to Thurrock, Southend, Basildon and Castle Point. So that's our way of trying to describe. I could have put top, middle and bottom, apologies, but it's essentially that.
So you do you see that as still hard and fast, or will there be tendency to look
I don't think there's
as it gets more difficult?
I don't think there's any ambition. There has been some speculation. I mean, there's been some certain districts or certain communities in districts have suggested they wouldn't mind splitting, but I think the reality is that I don't think any council that I'm aware of is taking that seriously and want to pursue it within this process.
Councillor Green.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Alex and Leader, for your report. With this current timetable, are you confident we will meet it, and is there anything that keeps you awake at night with what we're doing?
There is no movement from this timetable, you know, it's set. This is the work that we're doing, and we've committed that we will do this work, and we will have the work done, ready to submit, to share with our partners. As soon as we've started to do the work, we'll start sharing it with the other working groups as well. We're not doing this and keeping it all secret until like we finally have reveal day. You know, people will certainly be, we'll be working with Essex and Southend and Basildon will know, exactly what work that we're doing. But the timetable, there is no messing around with the timetable. We need to get this work done and agreed before at that date. If it's not in, it won't get considered, because the government then need to take the time to consider it before going out to consultation on the chosen.
Thank you. Are there any more questions? No? Okay. Just a couple from me. Alex, you mentioned growth when you were speaking. And for me, that's something that I think is really fundamentally important. When we're looking at the potential new local authorities, we should be thinking, we know we've got growth coming. Doesn't matter who's in government, we've got it coming, but this government's been very clear that it intends to steam ahead with that. It's not just about creating new councils for the here and now, it's about creating councils that can grow and accommodate our growing population. Some of the local authorities I see us being lumped with, they've been quite vocal in the past that they don't have the land supply to meet their targets. That leads me to worry, is Thurrock going to be shafted later down the line and take the growth for a much wider area? How are we making sure that when we're looking at options, we are looking to partner with local authorities that can accommodate their share of growth as well, so that it's evenly distributed and not a situation where they come together and think, oh, Thurrock's on the border of East London, let's put our growth there.
Thank you. Councillor, Chair, I think you're quite right that growth is an essential part of the equation as we build any business case or proposal for local government reorganisation. And I think what the leader has done by asking officers to carry out this work is allowed us to be at the heart of the development of a business case that allows us to take into consideration your exact point and work with our colleagues who are supporting us to draft our business case and ask them those very specific questions about where housing growth could be, what the targets would be for any new potential geography, and use the information that we know is out there on growth and on house building to layer that into the options. That's something we have control of because we are drafting the business case, and that's something that we can consider and bring to members for the consideration when we look at the shape of options, and so we can take an action to take that forward.
If I completely agree, I would also just add, there is 3 years between now and these new authorities coming into existence. Every local authority across the land is under pressure, as you say, to grow. It's the right thing to do for the communities that we serve, to build the houses that people need to live in, but also the government is quite clear about its expectations as well to build in certain parts of land. So those authorities now can't just sit there and do nothing, as it were, and dump and wait until they're working with someone else. They need to deliver now. So to an extent, we will also have that clarity about where they're building and what their plans are, because the lead-in time is so significant. So I think it is from the perspective of our community here, it is something that can be managed over the next 3 years. We'll have that sense of what's going on. And then when this does happen, it is about a new authority. It will be about a new set of officers and a new plan, and they will have to balance the needs across a much wider geography there. So I therefore, the dynamics and the pressures that we face in Thurrock serving our community, they will face on a much larger, a new geography, a new set of pressures that I think will influence thinking in a way that we don't fully understand at that point, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's about one area loses out or not. Because, you know, the controls and the safeguards that we have in place now around development, the rights of communities to have their say, still exist. And if I may, Councillor Green asked a very good question about what keeps me up at night. It's not necessarily doing this, because we've got the data and we've got a very strong team to do it. It's actually the implementation. And it's about making sure that Thurrock is match fit for whatever comes after. And part of that is about having that grip on our development and where we want development and where we don't.
Thank you. And just so we've got some clarity on what the council's position is. Are we actually saying that 4 local authorities is now our preferred option, or are we saying that we're doing the way I read the communication around it was that this is what Thurrock's it's our preferred option, or are we saying that it's in principle our preferred option subject to more data? Because I was of the opinion that we're now flying our colours and it was 4, but from what I think you said, Leader, it's an in principle position, but subject to what the data and the evidence says as we progress.
That's exactly what it is. You know, we need to do that piece of work. I'm not convinced that the 5 option or the 3 option is right for us and that we should be doing this piece of work to 4. And from the initial work that I've seen, I think that it was right for me to make that judgment call to start to look at the 4. But as soon as we get more out of that, then, you know, we'll make sure that we share it as the next stage, you know, so that we take everybody on that journey with us. But I'm certainly not sorry that I made that choice.
Thank you. And you, both of you said that we're now privy to quite a lot of evidence, a lot of data. Some of it we've collated ourselves, others it's been collated in partnership. When will members start to be able to look at that evidence, that data, to scrutinise it, challenge it, rather than waiting to when we said this is our proposal and it's backed up by this? Before we get to that stage, when will we be able to look at that evidence so that we can satisfy ourselves that the process, before we even get to the preferred option, that the process is a satisfactory one?
Absolutely. So you'll remember at the General Services, it was at my suggestion that I said we set up a working group. So there's 2 members of your group that are on that, and we're now meeting every 2 weeks. We've shared with them our initial thinking. Dave's shown them the first set of slides. So Dr. Dave come to that meeting, and he's shared that. They're now meeting every 2 weeks, so I suggest, you know, that you do use that. And Yeah, so we will be making sure that we give those the evidence, that we share the data with them, that we gauge ideas so that as we're building the case, it's there. But I've also been very, very clear that when we are not going to just go away and do this work and then present something to you 2 days before submission. So there'll be an August overview and scrutiny meeting, you know, so that we can come back again, because this is the committee where it sits best. So it shouldn't just be this, because they should inform Cabinet of their views. So then when it goes to Cabinet, because of course it's an executive decision, but it's not a decision that I believe that we should be making in isolation as a Cabinet, and it's the views of this committee that feeds into that work, but it's also the views of our residents. So this really is a fast-moving piece of work that we've got to do. So the more that we need to come back, you can have my assurance, Chair, that we will be coming back to the committee with what we've got when we've got it.
Okay, thank you. I mean, I won't labour the point, but we've heard, I mean, I know we have got the working group, but the working group meeting in private behind closed doors isn't the same. We're talking about, you know, I'm not saying that across Thurrock right now people are tuning into this meeting, but it is a public meeting. It is held in public. People can watch, they can come if they want to. I think there is a difference between presenting information at closed meetings and, for the sake of transparency, presenting it at an open public meeting, and I think that's just the point I was trying to make. It'd be good to see some of that information now coming into sort of the public domain.
And I did say in my earlier presentation, we intend to go out to the community early in the summer as well. So as you know, we will be speaking to people to gauge their views, and our first piece of engagement will go out on Monday, as early as Monday, you know, to make sure that we're engaging. So there's very little we can do in the month of August other than come back to this committee, because it's got to be in September. It's not like we've got a year to keep coming back, you know, so we will come back as soon as we can to be as open, as transparent as we can with this committee. And of course, there's Cabinet, you know, feel free. Anybody can come and ask a question at Cabinet. I've been encouraging people, you know, to come to Cabinet. Don't wait for full councils. And I've been working with the leader, your own leader, to make sure that we are open, you know, that we build in the mechanism for this to come forward. So that's as open as I really can be, you know, probably more so than other councils are being.
Thank you. We've got devolution, obviously, we've got local government reorganisation, and then there's the shadow combined authority, which I think from a previous meet, I think the timetable for that is even tighter. I think by the autumn of 2025, we're expecting to at least see what it looks like, or it coming into effect. Where are we with that? What's that shaping up like?
Thank you. You're quite right. You're spot on. So to an extent, it's a game of two halves. So part of the decision, well, part of it is in the hands of the government. So we obviously submitted our plans, our business case for being a mayoral combined authority in Essex, and the government is assessing that at the moment. As the leader said, we hope that the government will agree that we've met the statutory tests, and very, very soon, we hope, considering they published the devolution bill today, one would assume that they would lead with an announcement fairly quickly, and we hope that that confirms that Greater Essex is going to proceed with a mayor in May. So the desire will be to have a shadow combined authority set up in probably October of this year, so that it can start doing things for itself, essentially. There's only so much we can do as constituent authorities. At the end of the day, you need the entity itself to start forming its own policies, its views, and making sure it's ready and functioning for when a new mayor is elected. In run-up to that, in parallel, the upper tier authorities with some districts have been working on the operating model. What does that new combined authority look like within the confines of the devolution white paper, because we know it's going to get transport. We know there's going to be certain powers that will definitely go to it. We've been working through a number of issues, looking at policy to think, so how best do we do that? Does things how do we as a unitary authority work with that combined authority? What's the relationship between the two? What do we think it ought to have on day one? And as the leader said, we attended a devolution summit with our partners across Greater Essex this week that I thought went incredibly well. Tomorrow, Thurrock is leading a cross Essex working group in the morning on economy and planning and the environment, and then in the afternoon one on, I think, on housing, with colleagues from across Essex to work out exactly what that new combined authority will be doing and how it will function from October onwards. I am confident that we have done the work necessary with our partners to make sure that we hit the ground running in October, so that when there is a mayor in May, they have a fledgling functioning organisation where they can start doing things from day one.
Thank you. Final question from me, I think it's probably to you, Leader. You mentioned that it's all go for a mayoral election next May. Do you anticipate that there should be council elections on the same day? If the government were to ask you now or in a few months, would you be recommending that council elections take place, or are you advocating for another postponement?
Council elections are scheduled for next May. It will be not our decision whether they happen or not, but they are scheduled, and we are planning to run for elections next May. That's all I can say. They are scheduled, and you know, our party is getting ready for elections next May. I don't know what your party is doing, but we've been told to prepare for elections for next May.
Thank you. We're always ready for an election. It's not so much what the political parties think. I mean, when they were postponed this year, it wasn't on the basis of what do the individual parties think. It was apparently what was good for the council, what was good for the process. So, putting the politics aside, because it shouldn't really matter what we think as individual parties, do you think it would be in the council's interests to have those May elections, or will you consider asking for a postponement?
I don't think it will be us asking. I think it will be what the government decide. It will be legislation, whether we have them or not. It's not for me. We won't be, you know, it's not something that we'll be debating and say, shall we do it or shall we not? You know, it will be for government to decide. But as I say, we are scheduled to have elections next May, and we are proceeding as if there will be elections next May.
Thank you. Any final questions or comments before we move on? No? Thanks very much. Thanks, Leader. Thank you very much for attending. So I know you had a personal issue, so I'm grateful for you being here. Thanks, Alex. Just wait. All right. Bits together. Well, I did ask. Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, so we'll move on to item 5, which is the 2024-25 annual report and quarter 4 corporate performance on pages 11 to 80. Sarah, is that you? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So committee are presented with the quarter 4 and outturn data, as well as the annual report. And this looks back at 24-25 and so reflects the work led by the previous cabinet. So the annual report is a new document. It follows a similar approach to that taken by other councils. It provides the opportunity to celebrate our successes from that past year, and it helps to describe both the breadth of activity that the council undertakes, but also the tangible impact it's making on our residents and communities. So the annual report's written for our residents, and it showcases staff and partners' activity that is aligned to our corporate plan priorities. It helps to remind us what we set out to do at the beginning of that year, what we hope to achieve from the corporate plan, and it covers what we think the challenges and opportunities will be for this coming year, including restating that focus from the Commissioner's 5th report. It demonstrates for the first time in a while how we spend taxpayers' money as well, and we've tried to do that in an accessible and simple way. The version in your pack is the draft content. So we are working that up into a designed version that will complement our other public-facing documents. And we're going to use imagery from the past year, and we're going to use the Fresh Start colours and branding. The intention is for this report to be published once a year, alongside the remainder of the corporate performance outturn report. So the second report that you have alongside the annual report is the Q4 outturn data. So these are the metrics and milestones that we've been bringing throughout the last year, and they act as the indicators of performance against our corporate plan priorities. We have taken on board committee's comments and feedback, and we really hope that you can see a shift and a change in the way that we have presented the report. So we've been working with officers to understand the impact of their activity and to better articulate that in the milestones narrative. And we've also summarised the overall direction of the performance in the cover paper. So we hope that helps to better explain what the data is telling us, which was a really helpful conversation that we had at the previous committee. Our assessment finds that there is evidence there to support that progress is being made against all of our objectives. But to be expected for a council intervention, there are indicators that ongoing focus is still required, and these mirror that of the Commissioner's report. So they include finance, implementation of the transformation plan. There are some HR metrics that still require a lot of focus, issues around audit. But it does note that that hasn't stood still. There is progress there. It's just that more needs to happen. So on the milestones, 75% are on track. So these are the pieces of activity that we set out at the beginning of the year to complete. 21 are making progress at a slower rate, and just under 3% are experiencing delays. We've tried to provide narrative which assesses whether the milestone has achieved the activity and the desired impact that it sets out to do. And that's an ongoing conversation that we're having with officers to bring out more of that analysis. On the metrics, 60% of those are meeting the expected performance target, with nearly 30% being off target. The metrics represent performance, but also pressures in the system, and that can be sometimes demand-led pressures, and we've tried to articulate that in the report. In the narrative for those that are off target, we've challenged officers to try and provide more information about what activity is required to bring it back on track. So taking both of those milestones and metrics together, we can assess the council's progress against the three themes in the corporate plan. So enabling people in place, and we've set out that analysis on from page 16 in the report.
Thank you. Do members have any questions? Councillor Anderson.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you very much for your report. Firstly, this is my first corporate ONS meeting, so this is, I think, a pretty basic question. But the targets that we have set, how are they set? Are they set via like internal service managers deciding what they think a fair target is, or are we using other similar authorities to acquire our targets?
So we've set a standard for services to use, and we've asked them to look at the previous year's outturn as well as benchmarking from comparators. So that could be other local authorities in our Sit for Nearest Neighbour group or regional authorities. We also have the Insight and Performance Board, which are a group of officers that are there to provide critical friend challenge. And part of the work that we've been doing throughout the year is checking back on those targets. Are they right? Are they giving enough stretch for performance? Are they doing what we want them to do to improve that element of the metric? And that's an ongoing conversation. So for this financial year, when we come to report on metrics, we may see slightly different targets because we're having those ongoing conversations. But the baseline for us should be last year's performance and outturn and the regional comparator, and we use that as a starting point to have a conversation.
I would just add, if I may, that you, in addition to the target, you also have the tolerance for each target, and the tolerance tells you whether it should be RAG rated red, amber, or green. And the tolerance means where in the movement against that metric do we think it is appropriate. There will always be a tolerance that is green, a tolerance that is amber, and if you slip beyond the tolerance, you do that to red. So what we're also doing with services is we're not just thinking about what the target is, but we're taking them through what their tolerance is, and to bring some standardisation to that, and just not just have that set by service managers. In my division in the council, we have the intelligence, insights and performance team. They are responsible for the way we use data across the organisation and how we find our insight. And so what we have is where you have a metric, we have a bank of those, and for each metric, you need to be able to explain what your target is and what your tolerance is. That is then reviewed, and they're all held in one place. So if there are particular ones, we have the ability to go and find who has assured that that is appropriate. And so we're bringing in an approach to performance that means that there's peer review, there's a discussion across the council about what is appropriate, there's a discussion across services about what is appropriate, and there's a robust discussion about where our resources are used, and it's not just set from one service.
Do you want to come back?
Thank you. Yes, where I was going with that was I just sort of wanted to know if there was like an independent peer review mechanism, and obviously there is, so that's good. In organisations I've worked with, internal audit plays a pretty significant role in monitoring and improving corporate performance. I've been on audit committee in the past, so I'm aware we've had some pretty significant staffing issues, and that's mentioned in this report here as well. Because of those issues, is it fair to say that internal audit hasn't played as big a role as we would have liked in monitoring and improving our corporate performance over the past couple of years? And if that is the case, now that the report mentions that we have done some recruitment, are we expecting, as we move forward, for internal audit to play a larger role in all of this?
Councillor Anderson, you're able to read our minds. Let me tell you why. So we, you're quite right to say that internal audit's been on a journey, and you'll know from your experience of the audit committee that there've been some challenges with recruitment there. What we did when we were setting up the PMAF, the structure that sits behind all of this, and we discussed this with the committee previously, is we used best practice from around the country to help us do that, given the position we were in. Only recently, a week or so ago, we were notified by internal audit that they are coming to the service to do an internal audit of the PMAF, of this work, about how we set milestones, how we set metrics, how we look at tolerances, and how we do those things. Those colleagues who have joined us in the recruitment that you describe have come in with great enthusiasm to do that work. And as the responsible assistant director, I welcome that internal audit, and I look forward to discussing it with both the audit committee and with this committee when it is completed.
Okay, Councillor Anderson, then Councillor Holloway.
Thank you for that. Last question then. It was with regard to agency staff spend. Obviously, you can see there, quarter 1, 2, 3, 4, it goes up and up and up and up. And in the comment section, it mentions that a report is going to be presented to SLT, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Just wondering when that report is going to SLT, and at what point we can expect the recommendations that arise out of that to have an effect, and we can see that to start going down and down and down instead.
Again, very timely. So SLT this week, we had a item where we discussed recruitment of temporary staff at the moment, and how the system is working from the perspective of our 151 officers from the finance view, so we can understand what's going on there. And our Director of HR is due to bring back a fuller report in terms of processes and what we may well change in order to better oversee and manage that situation. I think it's two SLTs time. I do apologise, the date isn't in my head. It was the 13th of July. Thank you very much. Yes, so it is imminent, and we will go through that. But it is something that SLT has been acutely aware of for a little while, and we've been reviewing roles, expenditure, to see what we can do in order to help manage down what is a significant budget.
Thanks. Councillor Holloway.
Thank you, Chair. The priority place section, page 77, transport, bottom paragraph, makes reference to the procurement or looking at the analysis of electric vehicles, which I want to say from our side is totally commendable. Given the briefing that we've just had on the progress of local government reform, what I'm concerned about is going forward, and in front of this committee in the past, Chair, we have had reports of ambitious projects that we're going to go forward with, in particular on assets that the council hold that are now life expired. And we have to be, as indicated here, going forward, and it makes reference to our refuse carts, for example. But it begs the wider question in relation to IT and assets that have now become life expired. And I'm worried about going forward with the procurement process in relation to the kind of limbo that we're now in, that we go forward and procure assets that when we are brought together, they might be incompatible with our partners who we might be aligned with under the authority in the future. So what I would ask is, or what I would try and warn against, because obviously the contract process is nothing to do with this committee. However, I'm worried about we go forward with our initial proposals that were in front of this committee and full council before the devolution white paper, press ahead with them and find out after local government reform those assets might be redundant and it ends up as a waste of money. And I've used this paragraph as an example to express that.
Thank you. It's a very good point. And it is something that we are acutely aware of. There is an interesting phrase, limbo, isn't it? Because I think limbo exists if you allow yourself to not think these things through, to be honest with you. There are certain drivers where we know, sorry, no reference to the carts, but there are drivers here where you need to do something if an asset is going to be depleted. You're still having to deliver a service, you need to replace that capital asset. But the real question, the real test here is about when we know who our partners will be within the context of LGR. And at that point, we need to start working with those partners to think about our own transformation journey, what we're doing in terms of renewing capital assets, signing contracts, procurements, and starting to align these things as best we can so that we are delivering value for money. And it is a judgment call about what you do and you spend now and what you think is appropriate, and that balance of risk, and then and what you can possibly delay, or what is imperative that you do now versus what you may well do at a slightly later date once we have a decision from government. But it is something that I think everyone at SLT is aware of, and certainly colleagues in procurement, and whenever we're reviewing contracts at the moment and what we're spending our money on, we are mindful of that difficulty, and we are navigating it. And I'm more than happy to provide further detail on that if that's desired.
No, that'll do, Chair. I just don't want to make sure that we don't go and spend money on stuff that might end up in a skip in 18 months' time. That's pretty much the bottom line. But yeah, my question has been answered, and I've got no further comments on this matter.
Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments from members? No? Councillor Panjala.
Thank you, Chair, for the opportunity, and thank you, Officer, for the detailed report. I am having a question about the page number 15. So this one, 5.2 of the 81 milestones, 76.5% have been assessed on track, green, and 21 making progress, but more to do, amber, and 2.5 are off track. So this 81 milestone, this is a sample of whole year work, or how did we take these 81 milestones?
So the the PMAF is made up of two ways of tracking our performance. One is metrics, and then measures. We're measuring something, measuring an outcome or an output, and a milestone measures activity, work done. And so at the beginning of the year, we set out things that we would ask officers to achieve in the various streams of the corporate plan. So work completed, things completed, and what we identified as the most important milestones were 81 tasks to be completed. What we're saying here is that 76.5% of those tasks have either been completed, or if they're green in this report, Councillor, then they have been completed within the year. Obviously, we're looking back to the end of March 2025. So we're saying that 76.5% of those tasks have been completed. Where they are amber, we're saying that the task is underway, but there has been a delay. The delay could be for many reasons. Some of the delay is about resourcing. Some of the issues are about circumstances outside of the organisation's control. Some of the issues are indeed because local government reorganisation and devolution wasn't part of the agenda when those milestones were set, and we've had to rethink or recast our thoughts on what those might be. And so what we're saying here is that over 75% of the tasks which we said we'd do have been completed in the year.
So those tasks completed one, who is picking that things like, so how fair it is that one we can consider that one like this report is perfectly right? Who is monitoring? Who is the monitoring this one?
So assistant directors have responsibility for the delivery of milestones within their purview, and they are required to provide an update to this reporting on a quarterly basis. They're also required to provide narrative. And as you would expect, within the traditional hierarchy of the council, that information is cleared through the appropriate senior officers. So as the assistant director responsible for my areas, they then go to my senior officer, and this information goes to SLT. So effectively, the most senior officers in the council are taking a view that this work has been completed.
Thank you for the explanation. I have one more question. Page number 17, B point, milestone for IT and digital change projects are partially met. This is linked to the impact of local government reorganization on long-term decision making on technology investments. So as we know, Thurrock is in debt, so we need a robust efficiency and more productivity. We have limited resources where we can use like IT and digital is making a lot of changes. We can see I have been like recently local government association meeting, and there is a Southampton borough. They are dipped in 39 millions, and they have taken robust decisions, and they are from 39 million steps to they are in a positive like 40 or 50 million in positive within 2 years' time. So Thurrock, we are desperate because we need to bring back to our resources to provide services to trust. We need to build a trust in the people. So I think the local government reorganization is they're making delay in order to bring the development in Thurrock residents. Is that one is like a delaying of the LGR? Because of that reason, it's delaying our IT and digital. Partially we met only. So where we have a lot of scope to bring the change in the IT and technology.
Yeah.
So
So you're quite right, Councillor, and thank you for raising that. We know that digital IT and particularly the use of AI will be the things that allow us to make the efficiencies we need to make as a local authority. And if the Chief Digital Officer were here, I think she would say the same thing. I think what we're trying to demonstrate in that phrase and in this report is that there is a balance, and it refers to Councillor Holloway's previous question also, balancing the need to make changes now and bring in AI and technology where it is required now. And SLT colleagues are making decisions around that IT infrastructure, as you would expect, where it is essential for delivery of services. And there have been AI tools created in the past year, some of them indeed shared in the annual report. I think the balance you're finding is that because of the level of investment required to put in large IT infrastructure, particularly around something like a CRM system or a large infrastructure project, there's a need to take stock and wait until it is known who our partners in LGR will be, because what we know is that other local authorities on the geography are doing lots of things with IT and AI and digital as well. And there may in fact be things that in this intervening period, while we set up these new local authorities, that we can tag ourselves onto. We want to be able to make the advancements in digital we need to make, but we need to do that with a view to getting value for money and implementing lots of new systems now that may not be compatible with the systems that our partners in the future would have, could be wasteful in terms of the use of public money. And so while there is a need to keep at pace, which SLT and digital colleagues are trying to do, they're trying to balance the value for money aspects of knowing who our partners will be in the future. That is sometimes a very difficult balance, and of course we don't want to get left behind. I would say that from this report and from what we have seen, officers are striking that balance well, but SLT will keep that under review. And of course, as it becomes clearer who our partners will be on LGR, we will be able to do more and faster.
Thank you.
Thank you, officer, for the clarification. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Fox next, and then Councillor Cecil.
Good evening. Leading on from Councillor Holloway's question on transport, are the council on electric vehicles going to lease them or buy them?
Forgive me, Councillor, it's quite a technical question on electric vehicles that I don't have the information for. There isn't a colleague from Place here this evening to give me that detail immediately, but I'm very, very happy to take your question away and provide you with a written answer, and indeed a meeting if that would be useful. I'll take that away as an action.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Cecil.
Yes, thank you. On the progress and performance by corporate plan priority, number 3, the enabling council, you talk about something you mentioned earlier, that you'll be delaying or holding off until perhaps the best opportune moment for us to go and buy. How are you managing the risks that the suppliers may be not prepared to wait or will move stuff away from our intent?
I think that the situation we find ourselves in when it comes to decision making about purchasing, particularly large purchases, about assets, be they digital or otherwise at the moment, is something that's also impacting large numbers of local authorities. As we can see from the number of places that are currently going through discussions about local government reorganisation, Thurrock and Greater Essex are not the only place that these conversations are ongoing. In fact, we reach, I think, double figures, and we run out of fingers when we start adding up the places that are impacted by this. That means that suppliers to the public service, whether they be in IT or other things, will be well aware of the decisions that councils are perhaps delaying, perhaps considering again, given given where they are with partners. I would say that in Thurrock we have very good relationships with our suppliers, and indeed on a regional and pan-regional basis we have very good relationships with suppliers too. And so they understand that changes in the public sector outside of the council's control and in line with what the government wishes to do can sometimes delay those decisions. I would say that officers keep those relationships as positive as they can, as you would expect. I would also say that local government reorganisation provides an opportunity to purchase differently, to engage differently, to think about how we commission services and buy assets differently, and we'll need to work with our colleagues in the private sector and suppliers to do that. But I think we're in a good position to do that as a local government sector too.
Thank you for your answer.
Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments? No. Okay, just a few from me then. So, first observation for me, that obviously we're considering this before it goes to Cabinet, so I've seen the Cabinet report. The Cabinet recommendations are really to note, and then to refer anything back to the appropriate ONS committees. I would have thought at this stage the executive would be, or we would be asking them to perhaps now start looking at some of the patterns, look at some of the data, and thinking about how they can actually use it. I mean, as a former Cabinet member, I always took the view that Cabinet was to make decisions, not to note. So, in terms of where we are, we now have a lot of data. We know where we're doing well, we know where we're not doing particularly well. Why are we not at a stage where we're not sort of putting sort of Cabinet proposals for looking at, you know, there's best practice here, can we look at embedding it over here? These things aren't doing well, they haven't been doing well for a long while, what's the plan of action here? It seems a bit of a tame report to me that it's the end of the year and we're just asking Cabinet to know or refer anything back. Are we not sort of gearing up now to thinking more around how we can use this data and how we can ask Cabinet to start thinking about it and how we can embed it or address areas where things aren't going as well as they should be?
Thank you for your incredibly fair question and observation. It's incredibly useful. I think that sometimes as officers we get caught in the work that we do, and you'll know and the committee will know that we're of course in a new reporting year now, and so we're thinking about what new metrics look like, what new milestones look like, how we look at pushing on and improving performance in the next year. I think sometimes when we write Cabinet papers and we put recommendations forward to Cabinet, you're quite right, we get caught in the work we're doing in other areas. You're right to bring our focus back to this, and you're right to bring our focus to those recommendations that should say we expect members of the Cabinet to use the evidence in this report to help them come to decisions on where they would like to focus in the year that we are in now. And I would suggest that we can redraft the recommendations to take on board your comments.
Thank you for that. I've made this comment before. When we're looking at this data, the temptation is to drill down and ask questions about specific metrics, specific milestones. That's not really what we're here to do. It's appropriate where there are ones that jump out and tell a wider picture, but you know, going through them line by line and asking you questions is not. It's pointless because you know you're not going to be able to give us technical answers on areas that are outside of your remit. I would personally suggest we do start now looking how we can start filtering some of this data through to the individual committees to have a look at, so they can look at these things in a bit more detail, because some of these red indicators, they've been there for a long time, and I'd like to see, you know, a frank conversation being had around them. But it wouldn't be right to do that here because we haven't got the right officers to ask those questions. So a personal recommendation for me would be to look at how through the rest of this municipal year we can now start disseminating some of this information to the right committee so they can actually drill down and ask those questions around you know, it's right that the red indicator where we're not doing well, that they're the ones that are mainly in focus, but also where we are doing well, how we can, you know, embed that across the local authority. I think, you know, adult social care, child social care, we've got some really good stories to tell. What I don't think we're actually doing is using it as a bargaining chip in local government reorganisation. That's a classic example. We're potentially partnering with district councils that have got no idea how to deliver these services. We have, and we're good at it. It's something that if it goes to the right committee, we can have a conversation around that. So, you know, just we should start drilling down and passing that information on.
Councillor, thank you. That's incredibly useful. You and I have been on a journey with these reports, and this is the first time in a long time this council has completed 4 quarters of reporting when it comes to performance. And so we have all learned how the reporting works. We have all learned how to get to grips with the reporting, and now indeed we have to find a way to use this information and use this data to improve our council further in the year ahead, not rest on our laurels, not think, and we have to be able to innovate, we have to be able to do as the best value guidance says and continuously improve. It's incredibly helpful for you to suggest that that's how you'd like to use this information down to committees for those conversations. We'll take that away, have conversations with the chairs, with colleagues, and put that into practice for the year we find ourselves in.
Thank you. And in terms of refreshing the corporate plan, this is a plan up to 2029. Where are we in terms of now looking at the next stage? We're looking back and we're seeing what we've achieved. There's lots and lots of green staring back at us, but so that it doesn't become a backward-looking exercise and a historic reporting of what we've done. We're already in July. What are we measuring? Where are we with that? We're talking about refreshing it. In my view, it should be refreshed already. We should not be going through the refreshment process, if you like. It should be done. Where are we at with that? When will we see the next leg of the journey?
So the refresh of the corporate plan will come back to corporate ONS in early September, ahead of going to full council on the 1st of October. And the new milestones and metrics, we are working alongside that, so we'll bring that at a similar time for approval.
So did you, told that you did you want to add something?
Thank you, Chair. It was only in relation to the point about the different metrics going to then the other overview and scrutiny committees. And I think Patrick has already said it, but I was just going to commit to take that away as an action to discuss with the scrutiny officers, and we'll feed back to the chairs.
Thank you for that. Alex, did you want to come in?
Yeah, it was only a really brief comment, and it's just been addressed there. It was just to say that I wholeheartedly agree with the chair with regard to sort of disseminating this to other relevant committees. I had a couple of questions around EHCPs and some children's services stuff, but obviously Sheila's not here. It's not an appropriate forum for me to ask that. So it would just be good to.
Councillor, I'm very happy to say colleagues from Children's Services are in fact here, and they'll be very willing to take your questions if you would like to ask them in this arena.
Right, okay. It might, yeah. It was about it was educational psychology. Oh, I also had another one. So one of the questions I had was about, I'd mentioned it earlier in the meeting about possible reforms to SEND system, and I just wondered how we take account of that going forward, because we have certain metrics here, but obviously if the whole system changes, that sort of throws up a whole lot of challenges, and my question was sort of what amount of input and like influence do we have as the government are making those changes, obviously not us singularly as Thurrock Council, but local authorities, you know, delivering the service, what input do we have as they change that system? Because obviously it's really important we're delivering it.
So there's a couple of things going on. There's the local government reorganisation, which we don't have a say in as a SEND department, how that happens. But there's also the piece of work that we are doing, and Councillor Howden has asked us to do, is to look at the impact of local government reorganisation on the SEND service. So what will be the benefits and mitigation, and what might be the risks and opportunities. So we're doing that piece of work for, I believe it's September's People's over in Scrutiny. So we're preparing for what LGR might look like for us as a SEND service, and perhaps a larger SEND service, as in we might be partnered with an area that doesn't currently have SEND in, you know, so for instance, Basildon doesn't have SEND, it's run by 6 county councils. So if we were put together with Basildon, we'd have to be looking at how that would impact on us, our workload. The systems that they use in Essex are not the same systems as we use. So that piece of work is going ahead at the moment. We, as a SEND service, don't have any influence over the government's decision-making around SEND reform. So the big piece of work they're doing around the HCPs, they've done quite a large piece of consultation work through Dame Lenham and some other work, and they're still gathering their information. So yesterday we got a request for some information that's going to inform their decision, but we don't have a say in or any input into their decision making. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I won't take any more time. Thank you for the response, though.
Thank you. Are there any more questions then? Councillor Maney.
Thanks, Chair. I just wondered when the locum EPs were in place, how long they've been in place for?
That's a fairly recent change. So we've now got them in place, and they are catching up on the reports. We don't expect to be fully caught up until really the end of the summer, maybe even the end of autumn, because of how long it takes for an EHCP to go through the system. It takes 20 weeks, so that will take us some time. But we are already seeing some movement on the number of reports we're getting through.
Thank you. Just a final comment from me. And it is a genuine, it's not a criticism, but in terms of the annual report, I couldn't help but think it's more an exercise in communications rather than being an accurate reflection of the overall performance of the council. I've got no problem with the council having a robust communications regime and talking up the things we're doing well, but I think when it comes to, because we know where we are, we know we are a failing council, it's really important that our annual report is an honest reflection of where we are and what we've done, but as much as it highlights the good things, it's honest about where we're not doing so well. And I thought that although it's good, I think that the draft annual report it airs on being almost a PR stroke communications exercise, and I say that not as a criticism, but I hope I wouldn't propose a recommendation to Cabinet, but I hope they sort of look at it and sort of maybe take on board what I'm going to say, and just running through some of the examples. So on the section relating to finance, it talks about how the council is reducing debt and how we're disposing of assets and how that's been very successful. Yet when we look at the metrics and the milestones, asset disposals are in red. When we talk about business engagement and business support, again, we talk up the things we're doing, but there's no reflection of the fact that the establishment of a business forum is red, and that the number of new start-up businesses are in red in terms of longevity. Improving our planning service. We talk about all the good things, but we don't mention that residential planning approvals and builds are in red, and the percentage of planning applications, minor and major, determined within 14 weeks, are both red. Waste and recycling, we talk up the good things we're doing, but we don't dwell on the fact we have abhorrent, appalling, terrible, disgraceful recycling targets that, are, when compared to the national average, are an abject disgrace. So the point I'm making is, and it's not a criticism, it's really important that when we look back at our performance and we produce a report, it's balanced and it's accurate and not a PR exercise. And I think this just errs towards being just that. So, as I said, I'm not going to sort of sit here and say to Cabinet, reword the whole thing, rewrite it, it's not accurate. But perhaps when we're moving on, we're looking at doing this on an annual basis, we could just ensure it's a bit more balanced, because as someone looking at it, I don't think it is particularly balanced, and it doesn't do anybody any favours when we kind of shout about the things we're doing, but we're not a bit as honest and as focused on the things that we're not doing so well on. I don't know if that's something you want to respond to, but perhaps just something that you could dwell on for future years when we're looking at annual reports, so they don't become, as I say, a part of our communications regime.
Your comments are noted, and I do understand where you're coming from, and there is an art to communication. We will certainly make sure that Cabinet are aware of your refuse. My immediate reaction is this is a council under quite a significant spotlight. We are transparent. The fact that you have this report with those reds, that it is in front of an overview and scrutiny committee, that it's here, that it's published, and that we hold ourselves to account, I think is an incredibly positive step. We have commissioners that report on us on a quarterly basis on what we're doing. You know, there is a significant amount of scrutiny and oversight on this council, and that is the right thing to do. We have a lot of good things to champion in terms of services within this council, and I think there wouldn't be anyone in this authority that isn't proud to do that. But I do accept the point that there needs to be a degree of balance there, that as much as you want to be positive about the good things that we're doing, it is about referencing areas where we want to focus on a bit more. For example, recycling. You know, there is more we need to do there in order for this borough to do more about being a greener and more longer term thinking about the environment. So I might say that we should refocus and think about our aspiration. Know what we aren't doing well and think about what we might want to focus on in the future, and we'll reflect on that. But I didn't want to not have the opportunity to say that we are transparent, we do report, and it's there. And it's that balance between the two, isn't it? But thank you.
Thank you. I'm not personally saying that this isn't transparent, and I think it's really important that we do have a good communications system and a good PR regime that does talk about the things that we're doing well. And I've got no problem with, you know, the appropriate service taking things out, but when you have a report that's supposed to be really a synopsis on performance, it should be more balanced. I'm not saying we shouldn't, that the good things shouldn't be spoken about, but in the context of this specific report, it does kind of project this this idea that we're doing fantastically, and we're doing the direction of travel is good, but I think it could be more balanced, so that the whole idea of an annual report is that, to me, you reflect on it and then you look ahead to what you can do better, what you can embed. It's basically a reflection of where we are and where we need to go. If you look purely at this annual report, we're there, we've done it, we're excellent, everything's solved. It does touch on, you know, as you move through and you get to the back, it does, you know, gloss over the things we're not, but it should be a bit more balanced about where we are, so it gives us an idea of where we need to go, and I don't think this quite does it, but you've addressed that, so thank you. So if we go to the recommendations, any more comments or questions before we do? No? Okay, thank you. The recommendations are... page 11. I don't usually slavishly follow the recommendations, but we're asked to note the recommendations to Cabinet. I think we note them. In terms of recommendations, I would come back to that point I made earlier about, I would ask Cabinet to now think about, it's not, I suppose, purely for Cabinet, it's for officers to think about as well. I know we've had an undertaking on this, but I really would ask that it's noted that we're asking now for some thought to be given to how we can start getting some of the other committees more involved in the monitoring process. That could be captured.
We'll make sure that's reflected.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm happy if everybody else is, rather than read the recommendations out, I think we've covered them. Are we happy that the recommendations have been met? Yep, thank you. Okay, so that concludes that item and brings us on to, I think, the work programme, which is at page 81. Are there any comments or suggestions in relation to the work programme? No? Okay. Just a couple of observations from me. It has been agreed that we have an informal meeting in August, I think, to look more at LGR and devolution. I think perhaps that should feature on the work programme, so that it's highlighted there. And also, we have a meeting on the 4th of December, and then nothing until the 5th of March, so it's 3 months with no meeting. I think perhaps that's a bit of a long wait for us to go about having a meeting. So not for discussion here, but just to say I will be talking to officers about how we perhaps factor in another meeting. Okay, thank you. And the action log at page 85, 86. I've got no comments or questions on that, but does anybody else? No? Thank you. Okay, I think then that, oh no, the recommendation tracker at page 87, again, no comments from me. I think we just note that, unless anybody has anything to raise there. No? Thank you. So it is 8:36. Thank you to all the officers who've attended and given some really good feedback on where we are with some of these really important items. Thank you, members, for your attendance, and I'll now close the meeting.